before I start. I've actually got my trimming scissors sterilised in alcohol, rubbing alcohol. I've got some pliers, I've got some wire cutters and some wire, because it will need to be wired into its pot, hold it absolutely still. My pokey chopstick for getting the media down in between the roots. It's narrower than my finger basically, and it's got a blunt end so it doesn't damage roots. And my scratchy forky thing for hopefully easing the media out of the roots without tearing them too much. So let's get the tripod set up. Okay, first job is to cut the wire that's holding it in its pot, and then hopefully the whole thing's just going to lift out. That's my theory. Hopefully by bending these now, the little bits of plastic grill that stop the media falling out of the holes will come out with the media. Oh my god, that's in there. There we go. Right, exactly what I was hoping for. In the orchid world, the last thing we need is mould, and yet this is absolutely covered in what looks like mould. This is mycelium, and I have to save some of this. This is vitally important for pines, especially Scots pines, to allow their roots to take up nutrients. It's a symbiotic relationship, I believe that's the expression. The other good thing is I've got some nice fresh roots here. I'm going to have to try and go really careful and not damage them. I'll have to see how I get on. Some are just going to be damaged, I'm sure. But I want to try and keep as many of these fresh roots as I can, and I'd rather leave some of the old media in than damage too many of those, so I'm going to have to go very careful. But I've got to save some of this, put it to one side, and then break it up and sprinkle it in the new media. It is vitally important for this tree. And that is a hell of a growth. There was nothing like that last time. That's brilliant. No wonder it's been doing reasonably well without being repotted for about 5 years. It literally is incredibly important. Oops, we've got a few creatures in here. Not too many. Ooh. I think that's it. There might be a few more lurking in there. But yeah, there's a couple more. I'll get rid of them as I go. But a little bit of old media being left is not the end of the world. I'd rather do that than mess up some of these roots. So while I scratch all this off and everything like that, I'll just speed this up as a separate section. Okay, that's a bit of a shame, but most of those roots around the edge have detached. The whole base just came off. So I'll have to grow some new roots. I mean, there are active roots here, and by rejuvenating it into some new media along with the mycelium, it's going to get going. It'll be fine. It's been sat in that pot a huge amount of time, so this media that it's in has no goodness in it at all. So yeah, I'll get myself some media knocked up. I'm not going to take any more of that older media off, quite honestly. It's going to go quite high in its pot, so it'll have plenty of depth of new media to go into. And now that I've actually repotted it, this might be one that will go on the list to do again next year. Literally, so that any new roots that have grown will be nicely sitting in the new media, not tangled up and tear off, and I can refresh the media again perhaps next year, or at least the year after. But yeah, I mean, there are some new roots on there. Doesn't look much for quite a large tree, but quite honestly, they don't need a lot, pines. They're growing next to nothing a lot of the time. So I'm just taking some of the moss off. We have to excuse the racket in the background, but the guys have just come round to cut the grass in the park out the back, hence the racket. And the two cats have done a runner, because they really don't like that sort of noise. Yeah, so that'll do. No need to rinse it or anything like that. It can just go in its new media just as it is. So I'll have a tidy up and get some media sorted out, and then we'll get it in its pot. Okay, first thing to do is get the pot ready. So I've got my little pieces of plastic mesh that go over the holes on the inside, and just bend the wires around like that, holds them in place, stops the media falling out. Has to be done basically, otherwise as you water you gradually wash it out and you end up with quite a large hole, and obviously a hole is no good for growing roots in, so just put those in place. And the big one in the middle. Now this pot's a little bit of a pain, but I haven't got another one. One day I will get a nice pot for this tree, because it's quite a nice tree, but at the moment it's going back in its original cheapo Chinese copy pot. It is china or clay or whatever you want to call it, but it's just, if you look at it you can probably see it's not even a perfect oval, it's misshapen, so it's not a good pot, but it'll do for now. Okay, and then I've got to get my long pieces of wire in, and the fact that I've only got 3 holes and no holes to the sides, I'm going to have to cross the wires. So one wire will come up round there and go and join that one, the other one will come up and join that one. But to start with, you just need to get them in there basically. It's a very easy thing to forget, is not getting your wires in place. Get all your media and your tree in and get it all nicely settled down, and then remember that you need some wires. You'll take it all out again basically. Not funny. I have done it on more than one occasion. You just sit that in. The pliers are going to pull it tight anyway, and then put the other one down the other side, sticking out the top so that I can get hold of it. Again, just settle that down nice and flat. The wires will pull it tight, and then I can just ease that wire over to the side, out of my way, and so that I don't poke myself in the eye while I'm doing this. Okay, I'll go and get myself some media sorted out, and then we'll be back. Okay, the mix I'm going to use for this, I'm using the ericaceous compost, because basically Scots pine are acid loving plants. They often grow on heathland, which is covered in heather, which is obviously acidic. They even grow in boggy, wet heath like areas. So they do like acidic soil, so that's what it's going to get. But they also like a very free draining mix, so they're going to get a heavy dose of mycorrhiza, which is koyodama, and It is just basically chunky grit, but pines love this stuff. It really sets the roots off. They really get going in this stuff. So it'll be not far off, half and half. It'll be very heavy on the grit. Right, before I get in a mess, let's get some grit in the bottom of the pot, just as a sort of liner for drainage purposes. It serves two purposes really, because it also stops the roots sticking to the bottom of the pot. They tend to grab hold of this instead. It only needs a thin layer. It's only to allow any excess water just has somewhere to be while it finds its way out through the drainage holes. Stops the roots staying too wet in the base. That's all it's for. So get that pot out of the way now, and a shed load of that. And then a shed load of this to go with it. All this is going to come out in a nice big lump, I think. I'll save making too much mess. I don't know whether I need all that, so mixed up. As I said, I want this heavy on the grit. It's got to be well drained. I mean, I've seen pines growing, standing in acidic water on heathland, but they don't grow too well like that. They just about live, because obviously that would dry out in warmer, drier periods and give them a chance, but they don't do well, but they don't necessarily die. So they like their acidic soil, and they prefer a well-drained soil. Scots pines love to grow on hillsides where the soil is acidic. Okay, now looking at the size of that pot, that's nowhere near enough. So we'll do some more. It's quite amazing with a bonsai pot. You just keep poking the media in, working it into the roots, and you've got it overflowing out the sides of the pots, and after a bit of work you suddenly look round and you've got half an inch spare. You need another load to fill the pot up, and then you work some more in, and then suddenly all that's gone as well. It's amazing how much the pots hold. Now I'm hoping to be able to do this like that. Not make too much mess all over the place, but we'll see how we go. So I need a layer first and foremost to make sure that grit's covered and it doesn't start rolling around. Right, then I need a mound in the middle for the actual root of the tree to sit on, and this is the point where we get to actually thinking about where the tree's actually going to sit. I'm going to move this round slightly this time. It was that way round, you can't see because you're looking sideways, and I'm going to twist it more slightly so that that shari is a bit more dominant and shows a little bit better. Now, there's another upside to that. The trunk looks at its thickest looking straight at the shari. If, you know, obviously a huge amount of the trunk was taken off with that damage, so looking at it end on, it's very thin, but by twisting it around like that, the trunk itself looks a lot thicker. So is that high enough in the pot? That's actually not too bad. Bearing in mind it's going to pull down. No, it needs to go a little bit higher, not too much. The idea of that mound is also that it gets right in under that hollow part. I want this to sit slightly high so that when I pull it down tight, it's about the right height. And I think that's about it. Right, so I want to get some media around the roots, and then I'll wire it, and that will hold it firmly in place, and then I'll get the rest of the media poked down with either my finger or the little stick, whichever I think is going to work best. twist that round a fraction more. Yeah, and I want it leaning slightly forward, but not too much, or it'll just look like it's about to fall over. Right, let's see how I can do with the wires. I'm going to start by just twisting them gently with my fingers before I start tugging away with the pliers and pull them tight, because I want to get it balanced. If I do one wire up tight, it will start to pull the tree over to one side, and then the other pair of wires have got a lot more work to do to keep the plant in the position I've decided to have it in. So I'm just doing this relatively loosely with my fingers to start. And then we can get the ends off. No, we can't. Yes, we can. Who's stolen my wire cutters? Ooh, must have been me. Okay. And now, before I forget and start doing that, because I will forget otherwise, I need to get some of this into the media. Now this doesn't necessarily have to be at the bottom. Because it's effectively a fungus, it will populate the pot from wherever it starts. So it doesn't actually matter whether it's right in the bottom, up near the top, down the sides, in the middle. It will populate. It spreads basically. There is a story, whether this is scientifically true or not, I don't know, that where you get large populations of pines, this fungus, this mycelium, covers the whole area. So it's actually involved with the root system of potentially dozens and dozens of trees. And it can link them together, and because it helps feed the trees, there is a theory that some trees that are not doing so well actually benefit more from the mycelium. It's almost as though it knows that tree is not doing as well, and so it helps it more because it's beneficial. The mycelium needs those roots. It needs the trees to be happy, and so they work together for the benefit of both. Oh, that's quite clever. As I said, I don't know whether that's true science or somebody's nice little story, but it sounds nice. But I know that this stuff is extensive, and it works like a single body, even though it might be 30-40 meters across and spread out in a whole area, but it works like a single entity. It's all linked up together. It's a fibrous thing that gets into the soil. Right, let's see if we can pull this tight then. I'll have to do it a little bit from each side at a time, or I will tilt the tree. So get that one quite tight, get rid of the bug. They're actually only wood lice, and in a pot like this they don't really do any harm. They tend to live on debris rather than the tree roots. Just twist that round. Have a go at this one. Trying to keep this slightly out to the side so that as I pull it tight it goes down, so that I can bury it in the pot and not have to look at it forevermore. A little bit more. Got it. Let's pull the other side a little bit tighter too, just to balance it. Oh, helps if you twist it the way it was going rather than the opposite way, because that just undoes it. Yep, that's good. And then take off the long pointy jagged ends. Use the pliers, twist them over and sink them down out of sight, out of mind. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to pick that up a minute and get the media out from under the pot. And I can already see I'm probably not going to have enough. I'm just going to try and sink this down in a bit better with my pokey thing, because my fingers are quite large, and this just makes sure it's right down into every single root gap. And then without any root gaps, the roots have got something to grow into wherever they occur. If you get air gaps in the pot, you can actually lose brand new root tips on the grounds. They grow into nothing and they just don't work. They need to get into something good and solid. Probably going to end up having to mix some more, but we shall see. You can see the pot's quite full at the moment. Now I'm getting a bit heavy-handed because I need this compacted hard around the side of the pot. As you saw when I took it out of the pot, where do the most of the roots end up? They go in a circle around the outside of the pot, and that's where the media needs to be at its firmest. And they've got something to get into and get hold of. You know, I think I might just about have enough. Bearing in mind I want to top dress this with some grit. It helps stop the weeds growing, keeps the slugs off, and just tidies the end result up. Sure I don't cover up the base of the trunk, as that is starting to expand quite nicely. It's there, you know, given the it's already sort of 3 inches across. And when you look on Show Bonsai, one of the most important bits is that width, that bit at the base of the trunk that heads out to the edges of the pot. Gives it a feeling of age, as though it's been there a while. And certainly with this type of pine, you know, the idea with the tree is to give it the impression that it's had a hard life, you know, hanging off the side of a mountain in the wind and the cold and the snow, and it's hanging on for dear life in a harsh environment rather than sitting in a nice English garden. Well, that's why that shari, you know, the damaged trunk on this one helps with that look, gives it that feeling that it's been around a while. And the older the tree looks, the better. Right, just going to top dress that with a little bit of grit just to tidy it up, and then give it a hell of a good watering, and that'll be it. I bet now I haven't got enough grit to finish this off. I've got more, but not in here. Just about enough. And this now can probably, depending on what I decide to do with it, it could stay in this pot 4 or 5 years now and be quite happy. As long as it's fed and watered, because obviously there's some food in that media that I've just used which will last it a while, but eventually it will get watered out and it will just become inert with no goodness in it, and that's the point where you start feeding. And this year it needs feeding quite well because it's been hacked back and pretty crackered. I'll just get the camera off and just have a quick look. Okay, so that's that done. As I said, I may repot it spring again next year if I get a good pot. I may leave it till the following spring. But the important thing with this type of pine is to wait for the sap to rise. And you can tell when the sap's rising because the little buds start to move. They're endearingly known as candles as they grow because they extend. Now any that extend dramatically on this tree this year will promptly get chopped and just literally pinched off, and then they will side bud from the point where it breaks. Ones that extend massively and strong can be taken almost off completely. Those that are a weaker sort of one can just have the tip taken off, and that will balance the tree up a little bit because it has been disturbed. But yeah, I mean, some of the branches are pushing some buds quite nicely now. That one's got 3, that's one too many. Take the middle one off. Oh, I need 2 hands. But yeah, I mean, we took quite a lot of this off. We actually cut it back quite hard in places, hoping that it's going to back bud in many areas. But with the tree leaning a little bit more forward than it was before, it makes that apex look better because it doesn't seem to be hanging all out the back now. This branch needs to bush up a bit, as does this lower one, and eventually some of these shoots might have to come off. I would like to see a gap through there, sort of more like that. I might even wire that to the trunk, but the trouble is with these is you wire them for a year or 2 years, take the wire off and they just go boing and bounce back again, so it's probably not worth it. But yeah, I mean, this one hopefully will thicken up and form its first main branch, followed by this one, the idea being that the shape flows up to there and not so much down here. It's as though the wind was getting at it from one side, so you know, the bit facing the brunt of the wind here is pushed back into the tree and stunted, and then away from the wind the tree grows away better. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite pleased. That's quite a nice tree for a collected tree. You know, that's coming on quite nicely. It's different if you grow a tree from a seedling. You can make sure every branch is perfect and exactly where you want. But when you collect one, all you can work with is what you've got, which is what I've had to do with this. Coming on nicely. I like that tree. And I just love this additional bit through here, especially the way this climbs into that negative space in that gap there. It might need to come back a bit. It might be just a little bit too long. But I'll have a think about that. You know, that's fine tuning, not for now. Most important thing now is to get that root system back up and running. The mycelium's in the pot. That'll help with the new roots and help feed the tree. So right, back out in the sunshine for you and a really good watering. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time. Just as an afterthought, that is the last repot for this year. My English beech, I've missed the chance. The leaves are far too open for me to repot that now, so that'll have to be done next year. I don't repot in the autumn. There's a good reason for that. On a deciduous tree, autumn is basically when the tree reabsorbs all of the goodness out of the leaves, all the chlorophyll and everything, the sugars and everything, and takes them down into the root system to go dormant for the winter. So if you repot it at that point, disturb the roots, when it comes to spring, there's nowhere near as much energy to push the new growths out and the new buds and the new leaves. So I like to do it in the spring, when all of that goodness that's been stored away for the winter climbs up the tree and starts to push the leaves out. At that point, the roots aren't actually doing much. So for me, that's the time to disturb them. And then when the leaves open up, photosynthesize, it triggers new fine root growth to feed the tree. So that's how I work. Not everybody does the same thing, but yeah. So that's the Scots pine done. Pleased with that.